I'm Rachel, and when I accidentally discovered my husband's secret divorce papers hidden in his office, I had 48 hours to protect everything I'd built before he could destroy me financially. What he didn't know was that I'd been quietly building a business empire while he thought I was just his supportive housewife, and I was about to make him realize that divorcing me would cost him everything he thought he owned. See, my husband David thought he was married to a naive woman who'd be helpless without him. He had no idea that his simple housewife had been secretly running a multi-million-dollar consulting business and owned the properties he thought belonged to him. When I moved my assets and revealed my true net worth 1 week later, David went from planning my destruction to begging me not to leave him. But the real shock? I'd been playing the long game for 3 years, building my empire while he cheated and planned to abandon me. What started as his betrayal became the foundation for the most satisfying power reversal you've ever heard. 3 years ago, I was living what looked like the perfect suburban life with my husband David Mitchell, a successful investment banker who made $400,000 annually managing portfolios for wealthy clients in downtown Chicago. I'm Rachel Mitchell, 34 years old, and while everyone saw me as David's supportive wife who handled the household and social obligations, I'd been secretly building something he never knew existed. David loved the image of having a beautiful, intelligent wife who made his life comfortable while he focused on his high-powered career. Rachel makes everything perfect, he'd tell his colleagues at their monthly partners' dinner. I couldn't achieve this level of success without her support at home. She handles all the domestic responsibilities so I can focus completely on client relationships, David would boast to other banking executives, not realizing how patronizing he sounded. What David didn't realize was that my Harvard MBA wasn't just decorative, and my volunteer work wasn't charity, it was a carefully disguised consulting business that was generating serious money. I'd started Rodriguez Strategic Consulting under my maiden name, helping small businesses restructure and grow. David thought I was doing pro bono work for local nonprofits and women's organizations. Rachel spends her days helping charities, David would explain to people at cocktail parties. It's wonderful that she's found meaningful ways to use her education while I focus on real business. The consulting business had grown from 5 clients in year 1 to 40 clients, generating $2.80 million annually by year 3, but I'd kept it completely separate from our joint finances. Every client payment went into business accounts David knew nothing about. Every business meeting happened while he was at the office or traveling. Every contract was signed under my maiden name with a business address he'd never visited. My typical day started at 5 a.m., handling client calls with East Coast businesses before David woke up. While he thought I was drinking coffee and reading lifestyle magazines, I was negotiating 6-figure consulting contracts. I'd also been quietly purchasing investment properties through my business entity, building a real estate portfolio worth $1.2 million across 3 Chicago suburbs. The first property was a duplex in Lincoln Park that I bought 18 months into my business. Great investment opportunity in an up-and-coming neighborhood, I'd told myself while David remained completely oblivious. The beautiful irony? David's own bank held the mortgages on properties he had no idea his wife owned. His colleagues would often compliment him on the smart real estate investments happening in his territory, not knowing they were approving loans for his wife's expanding empire. About 8 months ago, David's behavior began changing in ways that suggested our marriage was in trouble, though he was careful to maintain his facade of the successful husband. He started working even later hours and taking business trips that seemed unnecessary for his existing client base. I'm expanding into new markets, David would explain his frequent absences. Building relationships with high-net-worth individuals in Miami and Dallas requires extensive travel. These trips often lasted 4 to 5 days when previous business travel had been overnight affairs. The clients expect a higher level of personal attention. David would justify the extended absences. David also became secretive about his phone and computer usage, claiming increased client confidentiality requirements from federal banking regulations. Banking regulations are stricter now, David said when I asked about his password-protected devices. I can't risk client information being compromised, even at home. Previously, David had been casual about leaving his phone around the house. Now, it never left his sight, and he'd take calls in his office with the door closed. I noticed David paying more attention to his appearance and buying expensive clothes without discussing the purchases. New suits, designer watches, and cologne. That seemed intended to impress someone. Appearance matters more than ever in private banking, David explained his increased vanity. Clients expect their advisors to look successful and polished. Our intimate relationship had also declined significantly, with David often claiming exhaustion from work stress or scheduling conflicts with early morning meetings. The pressure in investment banking is intense right now, David would say when I tried to discuss our emotional distance. Once I close these new accounts, things will calm down. David had also become critical of my appearance and activities in subtle ways that I now recognize as him mentally preparing to leave. You should consider doing something more challenging than volunteer work, David would suggest dismissively. Maybe get back into the corporate world where you can contribute financially. Looking back, David was exhibiting classic signs of someone preparing to leave a marriage, but I was too focused on building my business to fully process the implications. The irony was that while David was planning his exit strategy, I was accidentally creating the perfect protection against exactly what he was plotting. Most telling was David's new interest in our financial arrangements and his suggestions about updating our legal documents. We should review our estate planning, David had mentioned several times. Make sure everything is structured properly for tax purposes. I now realize David was trying to get a complete picture of our assets before filing for divorce, not knowing that he was missing 90% of my actual wealth. Last month, David's careful facade crumbled when I discovered divorce papers hidden in his home office while looking for a document he'd asked me to find. Rachel, can you grab the insurance papers from my desk? David had called from his car while rushing to meet a client. They're in the filing cabinet, second drawer, behind the tax documents. While searching for the insurance documents, I found a folder labeled Personal Legal Matters that contained draft divorce papers dated 3 weeks earlier. Petition for dissolution of marriage, David Mitchell versus Rachel Mitchell, was the header on documents that detailed David's plan to end our 7-year marriage. The papers outlined David's claims about our assets and his proposed division of property that heavily favored him while minimizing my contributions. Marital residence valued at $800,000, 70% to David Mitchell based on primary income contribution, was listed as his primary asset claim. Joint investment accounts totaling $350,000, 60% to David Mitchell reflecting earning capacity differential, showed his plan to take the majority of our savings. Rachel Mitchell's contributions, primarily domestic, limited financial input to marital assets was how David's attorney had characterized my role in our marriage. The divorce papers portrayed me as a financially dependent housewife who deserved minimal spousal support and a small settlement. Most shocking was a note from David's attorney: recommend filing immediately before Rachel can hide assets or claim business interests. The note continued, client reports wife has no significant income sources beyond household allowance provided by husband. There were detailed financial projections showing how David expected to maintain his lifestyle while I struggled on limited spousal support. Based on wife's employment history and earning capacity, recommend maximum $3,000 monthly support for 24 months, the attorney had calculated. David had been meeting with divorce attorneys for months while pretending our marriage was stable and discussing vacation plans for the summer. I also found emails between David and his attorney discussing strategy for minimizing my financial settlement. Rachel doesn't understand our financial situation, David had written to his lawyer. She'll accept whatever settlement seems reasonable. Because she's never handled money. Keep documentation minimal until filing, the attorney had replied. We want to control the asset disclosure process and limit her ability to request additional discovery. But the most devastating discovery was evidence of David's affair with Jennifer Walsh, a 28-year-old analyst at his firm. Credit card statements showed expensive dinners, hotel charges, and jewelry purchases that coincided with David's business trips. Tiffany & Company, $3,200, appeared on our joint credit card the same day David claimed to be in Dallas for client meetings. Four Seasons Hotel Miami, $1,800, for a weekend when David said he was attending a banking conference that I later discovered didn't exist. Email exchanges between David and Jennifer discussed their future together and plans for David to handle the divorce quickly and quietly. Once David is free, we can be together openly, Jennifer had written. I can't wait to start our real life together. The affair had been going on for over a year, with David using our joint funds to finance his relationship while planning to leave me with almost nothing. Discovering David's secret divorce plans gave me exactly the motivation I needed to protect everything I'd built while he was underestimating me. I had 48 hours before David returned from his business trip, giving me a narrow window to secure my assets before he could file papers. First, I contacted my business attorney to ensure my consulting company and real estate investments were completely protected from any marital claims. Your business predates the marriage planning and operates independently, my attorney confirmed. David has no legal claim to Rodriguez Strategic Consulting. The real estate portfolio is held by your business entity, the attorney continued. These assets are protected from marital division. I also moved my business accounts to a new bank and updated all legal documentation to ensure David couldn't access any business-related funds. We're creating an impenetrable legal barrier between your business assets and any marital claims, my attorney explained the protection strategy. The consulting business alone was worth $3.2 million in annual contracts and intellectual property, none of which David could touch. I also discovered that 3 properties in our neighborhood that David thought he was admiring were actually owned by my business entity. The house next door that David always compliments? I bought it 6 months ago as a rental investment. The commercial building where David's favorite restaurant operates? I own that too. The real estate portfolio had grown to $1.8 million in value, generating $180,000 annually in rental income that David knew nothing about. Most satisfying was realizing that David's own bank held mortgages on properties his wife secretly owned. But here's where this story gets absolutely insane. When my accountant tallied everything up, I realized I wasn't just protecting myself from David's divorce. I was actually worth more than he was. Rachel, your total net worth is approximately $4.8 million, my accountant informed me. Your husband's individual assets are maybe $1.2 million. You've been funding his lifestyle while building your own empire, the accountant continued. David doesn't realize he's married to someone richer than him. While David was planning to divorce his financially dependent wife, he was actually planning to leave the wealthiest woman he'd ever know. The consulting business was generating more annual income than David's banking salary, and the real estate investments were appreciating faster than his stock portfolio. David thinks he's the breadwinner, but you've been the millionaire this whole time, my attorney observed. This revelation completely changed my strategy from protecting assets to planning the most satisfying power reversal in divorce history. Armed With the knowledge that I was actually the wealthier spouse, I planned to let David file his divorce papers before revealing the truth about who he was really married to. When David returned from his business trip, I acted completely normal while watching him prepare to destroy what he thought was my helpless life. "How was your trip?" I asked innocently while knowing he'd been meeting with divorce attorneys. "Productive," David replied smugly. "I made some important decisions about our future." 3 days later, David served me with divorce papers in our kitchen, clearly expecting me to be devastated and helpless. "Rachel, I think we need to discuss our marriage," David announced while handing me legal documents. "I've filed for divorce," David continued with fake sympathy. "We've grown apart, and I think it's time to move forward separately. I want this to be amicable," David said while outlining his plans to take most of our assets. "My attorney has prepared a fair settlement proposal." The settlement offer gave me $150,000 and minimal spousal support, while David kept the house, investments, and most of our savings. "This seems reasonable," I replied calmly while secretly knowing I was about to destroy his entire worldview. "I'm glad you're being mature about this," David said with obvious relief. "I was worried you might make this difficult." 1 week later, I dropped the bombshell that changed everything. I scheduled a meeting with David and our attorneys to discuss the settlement, but actually to reveal my true financial position. "Before we finalize anything, there are some assets we need to discuss," I announced to the shocked room. "What assets?" David asked confidently. "We've disclosed everything in the marriage." Rodriguez Strategic Consulting generated $2.8 million in revenue last year, I began while David's face showed confusion. "I own investment properties worth $1.8 million, I continued as David realized his wife wasn't who he thought she was. "My total net worth is approximately $4.8 million, I concluded while David's attorney frantically took notes. "That's impossible," David said weakly. "You don't work. You don't have income?" "I've been running a multi-million-dollar consulting business for 3 years, I explained while providing financial documentation. "The volunteer work you dismissed was actually building an empire," I continued David's humiliation. "David, your wife is worth 4 times more than you are," my attorney announced to the stunned room. David's divorce strategy collapsed. As he realized he was trying to leave the wealthiest person he'd ever been married to. David's realization that he was divorcing a millionaire triggered the most desperate backpedaling I've ever witnessed as he begged me to reconsider our marriage. "Rachel, I had no idea about your business success," David said desperately during our next meeting. "This changes everything about our relationship and our future together." "I don't want a divorce anymore," David continued his panic. "We should work on our marriage and build our future together as true partners. Think about what we could accomplish as a team," David pleaded while realizing his catastrophic mistake. "Your business expertise and my banking connections could be incredible together." But I wasn't finished destroying David's assumptions about our marriage and his future financial security. "David, there's something else you should know," I announced while preparing the final revelation that would complete his humiliation. "I've known about your affair with Jennifer Walsh from your office for 6 months, I revealed his secret relationship while his face drained of color. "I have photos, emails, hotel receipts, and financial records showing you've been spending our joint money on her for over a year," I continued while David's attorney frantically took notes. "The business trips to Miami? The expensive jewelry purchases? The weekend hotel stays?" I documented everything, I explained my surveillance of his cheating. "While you were planning to divorce your poor wife, you were actually cheating on a millionaire who was building evidence against you." I produced a folder containing printed emails, credit card statements, and private investigator photos showing David and Jennifer together. Tiffany and Company receipt for $3,200, paid with joint funds for your girlfriend's bracelet, I read from the evidence. Four Seasons Miami, $1,800 for a romantic weekend while I thought you were at a banking conference, I continued the documentation. David's affair evidence would ensure I received a favorable divorce settlement regardless of my superior wealth. California is a no-fault state, but adultery affects spousal support calculations, my attorney explained David's legal disadvantage. David will receive minimal settlement due to his marital misconduct and the disparity in actual assets. The legal implications were devastating for him. David's affair had cost him not just his marriage to a millionaire, but any chance of a reasonable financial settlement. Jennifer expects you to take care of her financially, I added with cruel satisfaction. How will you explain that you'll be receiving alimony instead of paying it? The final twist that destroyed David completely was revealing how interconnected our professional worlds had become. David, do you remember praising the efficient management of the Riverside office complex during your client presentations? I asked innocently. It's one of the best-run commercial properties in the city, David replied automatically, not understanding where this conversation was heading. Your bank approved a $2.3 million refinancing package for that property last year, I continued while David began to look concerned. I own that building, I revealed while David processed the implications. Your bank holds the mortgage on my property. The investment opportunities you've been recommending to your high-net-worth clients? Half of them are my properties. I continued his professional humiliation. The Lincoln Park duplex you told the Hendersons about? Mine. The Naperville office complex you showed the Johnson family? Also mine. Your biggest banking success this year was financing properties owned by the wife you were planning to abandon, I concluded the revelation. David realized that his professional reputation was built partly on deals with his wife's business empire that he'd never known existed. My colleagues at the bank know your properties by name, David said in growing horror. If they find out about the divorce and my affair, your career will be over, I confirmed his fears. Banking executives don't trust people who cheat on their business partners. When Jennifer finds out you're broke and professionally ruined, how long do you think she'll stick around? I asked with satisfaction. David had gone from planning to leave his dependent wife to facing divorce from a millionaire who could destroy his career with a phone call. Rachel, please, David begged. We can work this out. I'll end things with Jennifer. We can start over. You had your chance to be married to a successful businesswoman, I replied coldly. Instead, you chose to be a cheating ex-husband with a ruined reputation. The meeting ended with David's attorney advising him to accept whatever settlement I offered in hope I didn't pursue criminal charges for the stolen marital funds he'd spent on his affair. David's complete professional and personal destruction led to the most satisfying divorce settlement while I kept everything I built and gained my freedom. The divorce was finalized with David receiving minimal settlement due to his adultery and financial misconduct during the marriage. David received $75,000 and no spousal support. The final judgment reflected his reduced circumstances. Rachel retains all business assets and real estate investments. The court confirmed my empire remained intact. David's banking career suffered significant damage when his colleagues learned about his affair and the divorce scandal. David Mitchell's personal conduct reflects poorly on professional judgment, his employer's performance review noted. Clients don't trust advisors who can't manage their own financial relationships. David lost several major accounts. Meanwhile, my consulting business grew by 40% as word spread about my success and strategic thinking. Rachel Mitchell's divorce strategy demonstrates exceptional business acumen. New clients sought my expertise. Anyone who can build a secret empire while married to a banker has serious skills. Referrals increased dramatically. I also started dating Marcus Chin, one of David's former clients who'd always been impressed by my property management. I knew there was something special about the woman behind those investment strategies, Marcus told me during our first official date. David never realized he was married to the most successful businesswoman he'd ever meet, Marcus added while we celebrated my freedom. Today, my business generates $4.2 million annually, and I own $3.1 million in real estate across 3 states. David works for a smaller firm and rents a studio apartment while trying to rebuild his reputation. Rachel, I made the biggest mistake of my life, David texts me occasionally. I should have appreciated what I had. You had the opportunity to be married to a millionaire, I reply when I'm feeling generous. Instead, you chose to be a cheating ex-husband with damaged credit. That's how you handle a husband who thinks you're helpless while planning to destroy you financially. You let him reveal his true character while building an empire he never saw coming. David thought he was divorcing a dependent housewife and ended up losing the wealthiest woman he'd ever know. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being more successful than the people who underestimate you. Never let anyone make you feel small, especially when you're building something bigger than they can imagine. My husband's betrayal became my liberation, and his divorce became my biggest business. Success story. The woman he thought was his helpless wife turned out to be the most powerful person he'd ever meet.